and welcome to Roadrunner Photography Tour's tutorial on using color range to create a mask. In this particular image, funny enough, when I stopped on the side of the highway to take this image in California, all I saw was this beautiful gold light on the mountain and this great silhouette of a California oak tree in the foreground and a reasonable sky. So I stopped, I shot the image, went about my day, came home to process it, and realized that not only did I get all the things I loved, I also got a ridiculous number of wires. Now, my first thought was, well, I'll just clone them. It's not that complicated to clone. Photoshop will do a pretty good job. But in fact, it was very painful. In addition to Photoshop not really being able to figure out where to pick it up, because in some cases, like the top wire, I could choose from above, but when I started getting into this bottom wire, there was this muddy information underneath that was just creating garbage in terms of the cloning. In addition to that, these wires go right through this tree all the way to the other side. So I would end up with wires in this area of the tree, well into the body of the tree, that would be almost impossible to clone out. Certainly more time consuming than I had interest in spending on my vacation. So I thought there has to be a better way. And I've got some other tutorials that do this technique, but they really just used midtones and shadows. And in this case, I'm actually going to have to use some color range as well. So I'm going to go through the exercise of creating the mask and bringing in a new sky, and we'll see where we get. So I'm going to unlock the background layer just because I think that'll make it easier in the long run. And I'm going to start off getting my selections made. So we're going to, under selection, choose color range. Now when I bring this up, just because it had been used before on shadows, I'm going to go ahead and put it back to what you would normally see, which is sampled colors. So basically, if I pick a color, you know, maybe not. I don't really want to start there because it's clearly picking more than I wanted, because if I pick yellows, I'm getting all kinds of things that don't really belong here. So let's try this a different way. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to say, pick my shadows. And you can see right away it does a really good job of identifying the tree and this mountain in the front. Now, doesn't really do much for the fact that we have this rolling gold mountain in the background, but we'll get to that. So the other thing is I've got my fuzziness a little bit too high. So I'm going to bring that down, refine out what I'm selecting. You know, probably right about there is good. So I'm getting the really deep dark parts of the tree and this mountain in the front end. So we're good to go. We're going to go ahead and hit OK. So what we get are the marching ants. So our selection isn't quite done yet. I mean, our selection is, but we haven't done anything with it. And we could create a mask from here, but it's an incomplete mask. So what we want to do is save this selection, and then ultimately we're going to add to it. So under the select menu again, if you scroll near the bottom, it says save selection. We're going to go ahead and call this shadows, just because that's good and straightforward. Now we're going to hit OK. But we're not finished, so we need to deselect because we're going to go on to the next part of our selection. So with that selection saved, we're going to go ahead and hit select again. We're going to choose color range again, and you can see that it shows up as shadows. We've got the same selection possible, but we don't want that. We're going to choose midtones, so just click on it. You'll see midtones. Now we're getting something different. Again, probably a little bit too fuzzy because we're getting some sky in here. We don't want that. So we're going to go ahead and back this off. Again, not worrying about the gold mountain in the background. It's irrelevant. What we really just wanted to do was pick up some more of these fine branches in the trees that are not really pitch black like the shadows or dark like the shadows, but in that mid-tone range. So now we're going to go ahead and hit OK. We get the marching ants again. This time we're going to come back to select, and we're going to save the selection yet again. This time we're going to say midtones. We're going to say OK. Now, actually, as I'm about to hit OK, I see that it's picked up this one wire. So I'm going to hit cancel. I'm not ready to save yet. I'm going to actually pick the quick selection tool here on my menu. Now, your tools are probably on the left, but I like mine to be to the right, so I'm going to pick the quick selection tool. You can hit W a couple times to find it as well. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to make the tool bigger. Now, currently there's a plus symbol, which means I'd be adding. If I start clicking, left clicking now, I'll be adding to the selection. So if I hold down the Alt or Option key, you'll see that go to a minus. Now I can just drag that right across that line on that wire, and I have no more marching ants over here. So now I want to choose Save the Selection. And this time we're going to call it Midtones. And we're going to hit OK. We're going to hit Deselect, because we have now our shadows, we have our midtones, but what we don't have is this beautiful gold mountain in the background. So we're going to do this one more time. Select, color range. This time we're going to say yellows. Now that gets us there, not quite right. So we're now going to say sample colors. Now this time we want to go ahead and choose the plus, well, I don't even know why it has that many things. We'll see what happens. We're going to choose the plus tool and we're just going to click around. But because our fuzziness is 0, we're not picking up anything. So we're going to bring the fuzziness up and we're going to click around on our mountain. Now, as you can see, our mountain is kind of filling in, but it's bouncing around. And the reason is because we just really have the eyedropper. What we want is the eyedropper with a plus, and that's an add tool. It's additive. So now as I move around in this mountain, you'll start to see it's picking up all the tones. And I can come in and I can click in and around the tree. And although it's not really clear here, it's actually picking up. You can see these little white dots in here, and that's because it's picking up all of this mountain back here. Now we can also adjust this in a few minutes, but it's a really good starting point for the selection. You can play with the fuzziness. We can kind of push this quite a ways, and you can start to see it pick up even in more information. So now we're going to hit OK one more time. Another set of marching ants. I'm going to go to Select, Save Selection, and this time we're going to say yellow. Going to hit OK. Now we're going to deselect. So we have all these selections, but we don't see them anywhere, and that's because they're hiding under the Channels tab. Now over in your Layers palette, you'll see that this is Layers, or mine does, Layers, Channels, Paths. If you do not see the Channels palette, all you have to do is click on that, and I can see the things I just saved, shadows, midtones, yellows. If you don't see the channels, come over to Window, so again, back in your Photoshop menu options, Window, and just choose Channels, or make sure that it's checked, and you will find it. So in this case, now we have these 3 different selections, right? We have our shadows. Oh, didn't do that quite right. Hang on. I selected it instead of showing it. So we have our shadows, we have our midtones, and we have the yellows. Now in the yellows, we actually picked up some stuff here that we don't want. You can see that because we've got it all blown up. So actually what I want to do is fix that first. To do that, with the mask shown, because all I did was hit Alt or Option and click on this mask, I'm going to actually choose my brush tool. I'm going to change my brush to overlay. The mode is now overlay, and I want to make sure that my foreground color is black instead of white, because I'm going to remove things from this area that I don't want anything picked up. I don't want any of the wire there. So I'm going to make my brush bigger. I'm going to hit the X key to make this foreground go to black. X key will go back and forth, so I just want to make sure the foreground's black. Lost my tool. I'm going to come in and I'm going to start painting. And actually for this I can go big and bold, so I made my brush as big as possible. Now I want to be careful because I don't want to get down onto the yellow part of the mountain. I just want to stay in this area that's supposed to be black. And that makes me want to check the other masks again to make sure that I don't have wires showing up elsewhere. So with this one finished, I'm going to go ahead and hold down the Alt or Option key, and I'm going to click Midtone. Now in the midtones, I don't have any wires. I do have some midtones here, which is perfect. I'm okay with that. I don't care that I have some of the yellow picked up, because we're going to ultimately have that whole mountain. I'm just looking to see that I have no wires. We'll do that one more time for shadows. No wires. So now I think we're good. Now what we need to do is blend all of these selections together. So I'm going to actually start or stay on the shadows and add to the shadows selection the other two, and then I'll I'll delete the other two layers so that I don't have any problems figuring out which one to create a selection by. So to add, basically I have to pick the selections up again. So I'm going to go ahead and over the thumbnail, I'm going to hold the Command key and I'm going to left click, and you can see now on the screen that I've got marching ants around the selection. I want to add the midtone. So to do that, I stay on the shadows layer, but I go to the midtone thumbnail. I hold down the Command or Control key, left click one more time, and now I have picked up the midtone selection. I'm going to do that one more time to pick up the yellows. Hold down the Command or Control, hover over yellows, one left click, and you can see now that instead of marching ants on that grass, I actually have all of the grass. Now, even though it's all there in my selection, it's not all full white, so it's not going to make a complete mask yet. So I need to go to Edit, Fill, and I'm going to actually change this from black to white, 100%, and I'm going to hit OK. Now, I've got all three selections, and I've created a black and white mask that includes shadows, midtones, and yellows. Now I can hit deselect and see what I have. Now, much like I fixed the mask to get rid of the wires, I need to actually fix these gray pixels down here because basically I don't have a complete mask and I want the entire mountain as shot to be there. So this time to fix it, we need to actually make sure our foreground is white. So we make sure we're in our brush tool, B key or choose your brush. Make sure that we're still in overlay so we don't paint white anywhere. We're just clearing up the gray pixels as shown below the tree. Make sure our foreground has been changed from black to white by hitting the X key. And now we can just paint over these gray pixels. And again, you want to be careful around the edge because you don't want to pick up sky that you didn't need. And that's pretty good. So now we have a nice clean black and white mask. We're good to go. Now, because I don't need the midtones, I'm going to go ahead, left click, hold, and drag to the garbage. And I don't need the yellows anymore because I've blended them into my shadow layer. I'm going to left click again, hold, and drag down to the garbage can. And now I have this selection mask made called shadows. But I'm not ready to use it. I'm going to go click back on my layers so that I'm not in the channels panel anymore. I still have my tree, my mountains, and my wires. So how do we create our mask? Well, we're going to go to Select, Load Selection, and we are going to choose Shadows. So it came up on Layer 0 Transparency. That's just another channel that's out there. But we know we've created shadows. We're going to go ahead and say load our channel of shadows. This is the mask that we've gone to the effort to build. We're going to hit OK. We have marching ants. Now we're going to go ahead and choose a mask. So the little icon down at the bottom of the layers panel that looks a little bit like a camera, we're going to go ahead and click that, and boom, we have this mask. It's all set. Now we could still modify the mask, enhance the mask, but now it's actually on our layer and it's blocked out our sky with our nasty wires. You can also see that it's done a great job of leaving really the bulk of the tree here. Now, if we thought we might have a few more branches in there that we're not seeing, we can go ahead, Option, Alt, click on the mask, brings the mask forward, and we can just make these white branches in here a little bit brighter. So to do that, again, we make sure we're in our brush tool, our foreground is white, and our mode for the brush is in overlay. And I wanted to show you, if I wasn't in overlay, I would actually draw and now reveal some part of the sky or get this soft, weird edge. All of these things we don't want. So I'm going to Command Z to delete that. I'm going to come up here, make sure I'm in overlay, and now with overlay I can actually paint white on this tree, emphasizing these little baby branches without getting rid of my black pixels. I want that black mask there. I just wanted to emphasize some of these little baby branches that weren't being shown. The other thing is I see right here where the brush is that there's this bit of white into my gray. It's a wire that we missed. So if I hit the X key, make my foreground color black, and do the same exact thing, I can just clean that up really quickly. So we are good to go. Now, I want to make sure that my brush, because eventually I'm going to go to use it, it's going to be an overlay and I'm going to be frustrated. I need to make sure it's back to a normal mode for all its other features. And to get back to my picture, I just Alt-Option, click on the mask, and now I'm looking back at the tree and this beautiful mountain and the foreground. So I'm not quite done, right? Because now I just don't have any sky. Not only have no wires, I have no sky. So what I want to do is bring in a different image. It's an image taken on the same day. It's got a similar feel to it. A little bit nicer, a little bit more blue, but in the same kind of tones. I think it's really important when you're trying to blend skies into, different skies into images that have bad skies, you really want to try to make them close. If you don't, you're just really asking for kind of a world of pain. If I wanted to go to a complete blue sky, I would end up probably with some crazy halo around all these little branches. And the problem with that is, although there are tricks to get rid of halos, I would lose the little branches in performing those tricks. So instead of that, I want to find a sky that still had some white. It makes sense. It'll feel comfortable in the image. So to move this, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to get the Move tool. So if you look at your toolbar, left or right on your screen, you'll see that there's these 4 arrows at the top, but you'll also see that if you hover, you can just hit the V key and your cursor will change to the Move tool. So now we're going to left click and hold. We're going to drag our cursor with the left click and hold on and hover over the tree. We cannot just let it go while we're over the tab. We actually need to come into the image to drop it. We're going to let go. And now we have our clouds. Now, as we can see, the clouds are a little bit smaller, considerably so. If I start pulling this to be bigger and cover the whole sky that I need, I might actually stretch pixels and make it look bad. So the way to solve that problem is to make sure that we are changing this to a smart object. We're going to come over to here on the layers panel, where it says layer 1. We're going to right click in the gray and we're going to convert to smart object. Now, if you don't want to right click or you don't have a mouse that right clicks easily, you can come to layer and maybe not layer. See, this is why I do it with a right click, because it's so much easier for me. It's got to be right there. Why am I not seeing it? Oh, smart objects. See, now you know why I right click, because it's much easier. Convert to smart objects. So it's layer, smart objects, convert. But once you learn the keystroke, right click, convert to smart object, much faster. Now, what changes is you can see that there's this little white kind of paper down in the bottom right hand corner of your thumbnail. You don't see that on the tree because the tree is not a smart object, but you do see that here on the sky. So now we can free transform, and Photoshop will not stretch pixels. It will actually replicate pixels and sort of keep the continuity of the image. So Command T or Edit Free Transform, which you can see is Command or Control T. You'll get bounding bars around the image, and now you can just start to expand it. And you can see that the image is not stretching or getting weird, it's just moving around. Kind of get it lined up, hit enter, you've kept the transformation. And the picture looks fine, the sky has held its integrity. Now, I like to work top to bottom, so since I'm manipulating the tree image, I want that on top. I come back over to the layers panel, I choose the layer 0, which is our tree, left click and hold, I drag it up until I get that little blue line that shows up, and I let go. And now the sky has changed, been added or changed. And the tree is looking pretty good. It's all there where it should be. Now, one thing I will say is that I feel like the sky probably needs to be turned around. In the final image that I did earlier, I actually preferred it with the density of the cloud on the other side. So to do that, I'm going to go back to my sky layer, which is layer 1. I'm going to click it. I'm going to go back to Free Transform. Select that. I'm going to right click within the transformation panel and I'm going to choose Flip Horizontal. Now the clouds are on the left. So it's super simple. Flip horizontal, they go back to the right. Easy way to flip an image. I also want more cloud. So I'm going to take the transformation and I'm just going to pull it a little bit to the side here. Not a lot. I don't want to leave any blank pixels, just kind of lined it up better. I can also kind of move up and down until I get this where I want it. Hit enter, transformation is saved. Now, in this particular, well, in most instances when I'm doing something like this, neither one of these images have been manipulated, no post-processing has occurred. I like to blend the raw images together first and then take the final image and process it either as one or as disparate parts, but where I'm seeing them together as the changes are being made. In this particular case, I'm going to go ahead and blend or flatten the layers and make a single layer again. The reason is I'm never going to want, let's disable the sky here, never going to want this sky back. So the fact that it's gone is irrelevant to me, right? So let me enable my mask again. It's here. Since I never want those wires to return, it doesn't matter to me that I'm going to get rid of them permanently. So to flatten the image, layer, flatten image. Now I'm done. Now I will say that when I'm doing gigantic composites with hundreds of layers, I don't flatten. I work in a non-destructive manner and I continue to move things around. But in something like this, it's super simple. I just want to get to a single image to work with the way I saw it in my head the day I shot it. No wires. I don't need to save all these layers and have this gigantic file. It's just as easy for me to pull them together and flatten them. So now I have an image that I can go play with in Camera Raw and start the process of editing. And I might do many things to this. I mean, even off the top of my head, I mean, I probably want to brighten up the foreground, maybe darken the sky a little bit. I need to sharpen things because I have done none of that to these raw files, and so none of it's not really anywhere near final, but it might take me another 5 or 10 minutes to process now what's a fairly simple image. Anyway, that was the trick. I just wanted to show you. It works really, really well. The file size is a little bit bigger, and that's because that channel mask exists. If you want to get rid of it, at this point, we've already made and used our selection. You can come back, just drag this channel off into the trash to reduce the file size back to its original file size. It's as simple as that. Once you've used the channel, you don't need to keep it. Anyway, I hope that's been helpful. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned. There'll be more videos to come. Thank you.